to me, from my perspective, crypto, blockchain, cryptographic money, cryptographic DeFi, all of those, and then companies built on it is the purest and probably the highest performance version of capitalism that we're ever going to see.
Today we have Robert from Eigen Foundation. So he is the CEO. I think you guys must have known it. I'm not telling anything about him. He has a very vivid background in Web2, infra, and all the other things. We'll get to know about it. And also, as you guys have followed recently, EigenLayer socials, he in fact coordinated lots of things are now coming up. Just last day, EigenLayer came on testbed with 50 MB per second speed. It's the fastest DA in testnet at this moment. And more updates are going to obviously come on Eigen. We'll see that soon. So yeah, I think we not yapping further. We'd like to welcome Robert. Super thanks, Robert, for doing this. Really glad to have you here.
Hey, really happy to be here. You guys have been great partners, and I've liked the stuff you do outside of EigenLayer as well. So always happy to join in and dive into a discussion with you.
Awesome. I think Robert, as he was mentioning, you have a very vivid background. I'll just want us to, take us. I know might take a lot of time because the kind of experience you have, but just want you to take us through your journey, like where you started and your expertise in computers, infrastructure, and all the other things, and how you found crypto in the entire in your journey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us coming into crypto, we all have a unique story. It's one of the favorite things that I like to do at conferences when I'm meeting with people. I mean, it's not the first thing you ask a person in a conversation, but after you've kind of had a chat with them, you're going to actually grab a coffee or whatever. It's always great to be like, what got you into crypto? So, for me, I've been working in computing for a reasonable amount of time here. I happen to be just old enough that I actually was there at the dawn of the internet. So the late 90s. I was actually doing my PhD at the time, but I was also working in Silicon Valley, while I was doing my PhD at a company called Sun Microsystems. They're the company that invented Java. They, very heavily pushed forward into the web. They were the first computer maker that actually built the internet into the box when they were selling it. Every other computer maker was like, hey, stick a card in. Now you've got an Ethernet port, and they're didn't even know, should we commit to it or not? We're not sure this networking thing's going to pan out. And Sun's logo is the network is the computer. And, I saw a couple of patterns over my career. Some happened before me, some happened while I was watching them. Earlier ones that I saw happen was we had a whole bunch of proprietary networking stacks. And they all looked at something like TCP/IP, which now is the internet. For people who are familiar with the whole network stack that we have on the internet, base layer is TCP, transmission control protocol, and UDP, which is a generic, non-ordered data packet protocol. And something that was open and extensible ended up beating 20 plus different networking stacks that were made by all of the biggest networking companies at the time. So I just saw very early in my career this pattern that had already happened of open beats closed. Then while I was going through my career, we had closed software that was the dominant thing at the start of the internet. And Linux and open source software is kind of chinking in the armor. And it was interesting that people like Bill Gates and others literally called open source software cancer, that kind of thing. But I saw again, open, beat these kind of proprietary things. And proprietary to me actually had this trust element as well. Hey, trust us. You can trust us to build the software the right way. You can trust us to charge you for it the right way. All of these types of things. Then open was trustless. Hey, show us the code. I want to be able to download it. I'm happy to contribute to it. I might even donate money to Linux Foundation, whatever. And so the internet happened, but the thing was, it was in some sense the same excitement that I saw in crypto, which is why I had such a draw to it. Around 2017 is when I came into the space. And it was just, we were going to fix everything. It's the internet was going to make information free. It was going to bring up, everybody was going to get to a good standard level of education. Jobs were going to be available. We were going to get banking out to the world, everything else. But there was a key thing that now with crypto around, you can see back then it wasn't clear, except to some people who were creating DigiCash and other stuff. technology without money meant that all the money went back into the conventional finance system, conventional stocks, conventional banking, everything else. So, I worked my career in regular tech. I was there in the Web 2 transition. So moving to like data is the new oil, social networking, the idea of having walled gardens, kind of, turning the customer into the product, advertising to the customer, selling their data, using all of that. Whole bunch of things that for me, kind of took computing from this very bright, shiny city on a hill to something that was looking a lot more like, a place I wouldn't want to go, like just not a very clean, not a very nice environment. And it's fine. I mean, like we all work on it. Like without cell phones, without all of this, life would be really different. But it just always felt like there would be a better way. And I was wrapping up a company that I had founded that we sold off to a company called Arista eventually here in Silicon Valley, if you know networking. But it was a software-defined networking company. It had some hardware, but eventually was like pure open source software, all built on Linux, everything else. And I was going to go back into high performance computing, machine learning, 2017. So like, let me go back and do another startup. At that point, I had stopped working in big companies. And I had a friend, colleague who set me up on a meeting with Joe Lubin. And I talked to him about all of these problems I disliked about AI, ML. And this is 2017. I'm talking to Joe and I'm telling him, hey, I kind of know this is where it's going to go. I mean, deep learning had just happened 3 years earlier. I'd been following the AI space. We're going to get to a point where all of this data that has been there forever is going to become actionable in a way that none of us could imagine. I mean, now we can imagine, right? We've seen LLMs and ChatGPT. But, Joe Lubin and I hit off a really good synergy, talked for hours that first time. And I was very clear that I thought blockchain had so far to go in terms of having the product market fit for generic development, for generic apps, having the performance scales that were needed, having the service level reliability, being able to deploy, through not just the blockchain, but actually through a decentralized verifiable cloud so that you weren't putting trust at different layers. The unfortunate part, it's like a chain. Everybody knows this adage, right? You can have a chain that has a whole bunch of links in it that can hold, thousands of kilograms worth of force. And then if you put one dinky little chain link in there that only holds 10 pounds, that's the strength of the whole chain. And the stack of verifiability and everything else is like that. You've got to actually get every single part very secure. So blockchain is the solid base, forkable consensus, community controlling the token, and the, validity of the chain. All of those things are the foundation, but you see what we've been doing in blockchain is both building up better and better layers the whole way through, so that we can have this full verifiable stack. And then we also have this other issue of getting it to a good level of performance. So happily, Joe Lubin brought me in. I was at Consensus for 6 great years. A lot of amazing things were done across the company. Joe also spun out a venture studio. Mintio is the general manager. I worked for her as a research general partner on Ethereal Ventures. Did some work with some of the portfolio companies, did some work at foundations, other things. But overall, had a very good time seeing that Ethereum had scaled up quite well. And about a year and a half ago now, EigenLayer had gone to a point where the foundation was ready to launch. And I was, speaking with Sriram and the team and came in to lead the foundation as we scale out to DAO, decentralization, community governance, all of those things.
I think as I just started with the talk, it's pretty vivid, like your depth or experience, and the amount of your contribution both in as a first version of internet to Web 2 and now in Web 3. So I think we can chime in deep, but I'll not go there today. I'll just want to know the other things of the mainly EigenLayer and stuff. So we'll move there.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned that you came into Consensus, you talked with Joe, and then eventually you found EigenLayer and Sriram. What was the pull factor for you? Was it I think Sriram is a great person to talk with, and he expressed himself so well. But at the same time, I think many people who came into Web3 early for Ethereum and maybe Bitcoin, because it was, as you were a strong proponent of open source, I think Bitcoin was also it will not be governed by a centralized authority. It will be decentralized. Ethereum kind of maximizes it. Then EigenLayer also came, and it came with that verifiability angle. Although it's now being verifiable, initially it was like restaking and stuff. But obviously, like you guys have like figured it out from the very beginning that how it will be in 4, 5, or 10 years. So
Mhm.
what was the main pull factor for you to, come Eigenlayer and take such a big responsibility of be a CEO of the foundation?
Yeah, I think uh, so. For me, there's a very particular thing, which is coming into crypto at all. In my mind, was a mission to essentially fix the internet. We had gone down through all of these very trusted, this whole, don't do evil. Of course, people are going to do evil. Eventually, the company is going to get sold on the stock market. You're going to have somebody, buying Twitter, turning it into a whole different thing. That's just like, the brainchild or like the, in the form or vision of one person. It won't actually be that way anymore. That's how capitalism works. That's how the governance system that we have for economics, works in our society. So blockchain offers a way to fix that. So for me, it's a confluence of a couple of things. I came into the blockchain space explicitly because I wanted to fix the internet and have a better way for humans in society to have their digital image and their digital life. So you can see that's in spades with that. Sriram and I, we first met back in early 2018 when he was writing some of these foundational papers. They're really great for people to read. I should tell you, go back and look at Sriram's old papers. Everything's a race and Nakamoto always wins. Consensus at the speed of light, Prism Protocol, Trifecta Protocol, some of this early work that he did in that cycle going into the 2018, 2019 bear market. At that point, he was still a tenured professor. And so in 2021, mid to late 2021, he was reaching out to a small number of people. I was one of the ones he spoke with, and he was talking about some of these ideas about utilizing this whole pool of ETH stake that was out there and try to get more crypto economic security mechanisms out of it. The form and the restaking and everything actually wasn't there initially, but I was a huge, huge supporter. And so I, basically lobbied very hard, and we got Ethereal Ventures in together with Polychain into the pre-seed round for EigenLayer. And as a result of that, then that also gave me the opportunity to just do some additional advising and talking with Shram all the time, because now the investment company I was working with him as well. So just a tremendous amount of, for me, it's, I think for everyone should have this, like you should work with people that are truly inspirational to you and that you feel like you're always going to learn things from. I'm different. I do think that Sriram learned something from me. I think other people learn, but I learned so much from him. I learned so much from a number of people on his team. I'm going to go through, but if I list 8 or 9, I'm going to miss another 10. So I'm not going to name any other people, but there's tremendous, the depth of talent in EigenLayer is just off the charts. And EigenLayer Sriram has this amazing ability, which, him being a professor, having students, others, he looks at the world as something where he's trying to figure out the sort of independent axes. You can call them principles, you can call them orthogonal aspects of something. How do you divide something so that you're able to break it down to its constituent parts? And it's only with that side of thinking that you could have come up with some of these ideas. Why did restaking come out of Sriram's brain and the small group of people around him? And it was this very fundamental thing. And, if you look at the roadmap, one of the reasons I'm so bullish on EigenLayer is that this sort of thinking needs to happen another 10 times or more for us to actually tackle all of the crypto economic protocol mechanisms and everything we need to move all of Web 2 onto Web 3. A lot of people don't think about the scale of just how much computation is happening, how much data is happening, how fast it's happening. It's sometimes the wrong thing in my mind that people, who are looking at this talk about particular little numbers of, this transaction per second or that transaction per second. And when you go down to it, like when you're talking about API calls and clouds and other things, you start to talk in terms of billions and tens and hundreds of billions of transactions that are happening across. And it just makes sense. You have how many cores inside of one chip, one Intel CPU, you've got, 16 cores, each core is running 20 threads. You've got, 40 servers in a rack, 1,000 racks in a data center, 1,000 data centers around the world. And, how much software is doing how many things. And you want, in my mind, what we want is all of that technology base eventually to be settling and getting security from the crypto side to make it all truly trustless. Right now, there's just so much trust in every single component of internet technology and apps that we use.
Yeah, I think that completely makes sense, from the Eigen shift, not shift per se, it was always there, but kind of the messaging from being a restaking protocol to being a compute platform or a cloud platform, which is the verifiability cloud, which we are talking actively. I think initially restaking was necessary because we needed the security from people and from the operators and stakers. Now we have around 10 billion based on Ethereum's price. I think, based on my understanding, is that is a good enough security for many protocols which will be built on. And as I think Sriram also kind of draw this analogy with cloud every time, and I think in the recent token talk also he showed like some cloud analogies with AWS properly, like the EC2 equivalence of the new, the eigen and the new other things, eigen verify new things which are going to come. In place of the data centers for AWS and other clouds, we have stakers and operators. The AVSs are equivalent to the open source, like not the open source, the third party services like Snowflake and others, and then the apps which are being built. Like I think it's a good analogy to good mental model for us to get it, because most people still think that okay, crypto is just a finance or a payment innovation, but with this kind of verifiable angle where we can actually verify a lots of things, not lots of things, the computation and all, it kind of gives us a new paradigm shift. Uh, since we were talking the verifiable angle, and you also vividly mentioned that. Uh, how much, I just want to know from you, how much verifiability do we need? Let's say we are talking at this moment, right? That data is, we can see it's getting uploaded in the back end of this software called Riverside. Do we need that verifiability, right? Or let's say Amazon has so many computations across stack, which all paths needs to be verified. What are your thoughts? Like where we need the exact verifiable angle in the current SaaS across everything?
That's a great question. I think the parameters on what sort of stuff is going to be kind of throwaway or untrusted and where we want to have the trust, this is something that is going to be explored. And I know that there will be over time better and better guidelines. I can talk a little bit about some patterns that I feel like are there. And some of them, I think, when I've spoken with people, they don't actually see it, but once on their own, but once they kind of hear about it and think about it, they're like, oh, wait, maybe that matters. They're like, hey, I don't think I need or care about, I'm just doing some shit posting on Twitter. I don't really care about that. Like, do I really need to have all these tweets and other things, secure? And it's like, at first you're like, well, none of that matters. But then you go back through and you're like, well, the whole reason you're on Twitter is you actually want to see the right kind of stuff. Like what's coming up on your feed. Is it actually what you think you should be seeing? And then do you actually know that you've been soft canceled, right? Did somebody put a little, put a finger on the scale of the algorithm and push you off to the side? You don't know. Do you even know what the algorithm is that's actually deciding how much what you're doing should be weighted and shown to other people? The answer for all these things is like absolutely no. And then when you think about it, then you're like, well, actually, maybe I want to know and I want to have verifiability on everything, no matter how tiny it is when I'm doing stuff on a platform like that. And sometimes it's stuff that you're not even intentionally doing. Like, you're at the whim of on a platform, just, what you look before you scroll to the next video, short form video or something else, like that's used as a signal. You're not even intentionally doing it. You're just like looking at this and that's going on. But you again have no sort of ability for, to kind of judge it. Now, you may decide in the end, hey, I'm totally fine. And some people will say, hey, I'm totally fine with the idea that all of this, I trust someone else to do it. I think they have my best interest in mind, yada, yada. I mean, it's okay, but there are a lot of people, I'm one included, where I just know the way the world works. And, this is decisions being made by a closed body for business goals, for profit goals. If they have a push from someone to take something down, then they will, for business decisions that decide to do it or legal decide to do it. This is like, these are the type of censures that are exactly what crypto is trying to prevent from happening on money. But this is now actually, in some sense, I would say even like money is very important, but the ability for you to express yourself, for you to be able to have a livelihood, for you to have a brand and like control your expression of yourself in the digital world, that's something that money can't even buy, right? You could have a lot of money if you canceled. What are you going to do? So So I think it needs to be in a lot more places than people think. I kind of call it this, that like data, when it's raw data that doesn't have what's called like provenance, or like a history of where it came from, with attestations from, is it a hardware sensor? Like this came from a Sony camera with this proper GPS coordinate, and not just a guessing one, but actually now a blockchain crypto protocol that is actually geographically proving where it is, not just on GPS, but maybe on Iridium satellites and Starlink satellites, multiple things. And then it's attested to not just by a journalist, but it's attested to by the Associated Press and other people. So you get all of these extra points that give you more security. And now you see something and you're like, wow, that's a really wild picture about this world event. Right now, you don't even know. It's like, is it fake? Is that from a different war? Is that actually from a different famine? Is it from a different continent? You don't know these things. So to me, the verifiable world is like a very warm, happy place, where, everybody, it's this pushing out of, individuals kind of taking control back from the people who classically have looked to try to, utilize their power and their influence, to just have increasing amounts of control. I do recognize this, that, my parents came over from Europe. They were subjugated to communism and a lot of the problems of like more Eastern Europe after the war. And happily for me, they were able to come to New York City, have a family. I was the youngest of 4 kids born in there. And so I've picked up this American thing that I really think that you should push out decision making to individuals. I have this very strong individualism bent. I do also have, I actually have a lot of organized social beliefs and, spiritual beliefs and other things. I think there's a place where most people individually will choose to actually be part of those other types of systems as well and be positive in society. Not everyone. But I really dislike sometimes when people are like, oh, but I like these authoritarian systems because they work better and everyone's forced to be good and da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, but they're not actually fully expressing themselves as humans when they do that. I think you see it as well, that when you look at countries that have a lot more of this individual control, individual determination in others, there's reasons why you actually see, more free thinking, like more advancement of human thought and society, more advancement of business, more advancement of technology that come out of these places. It's in no small part. I moved from New York. I came out to California when I was 18 to go to college over here at Stanford. You can see here, I ended up staying for 11 years. So a little bit, you couldn't kick me out of here, back when I was in my, early 30s. And, it's just the freedom of humans to be able to express themselves. I actually think I'm very, I really do. If you're familiar with a philosopher named Rawls, he has this like original position, which is a very kind of philosophically sound version of called the original position of all men are created equal. But what is the implication of that philosophically in others? And so I think the ability for societies, the abilities for people are exactly the same. It can be any gender, any race, any part of the world, any socioeconomic. If you give the right fuel and ingredients and ability, then people will amaze you every single time. So for me, blockchain and now EigenLayer is actually part of that mission. Like, how do we actually up-level the coordination that we have in society and, make the internet, and by the internet and the fact that we all operate so much digitally, make the world a better place. Wrapping it around, obviously, we all want to improve our governments and everything else, but the digital plane is now something that cuts across boundaries. It's a universal global state, effectively. You can hear Balaji and others talk about it. So, so that's my big takeaway.
I think just as you mentioned a few, things beyond tech and in the philosophical realm, I had a, curious question for a long amount of time, which I wanted to ask somebody who is very deep in the ecosystem, who has seen the transition and who is, who sees the world in a different angle. I think this is the perfect time to ask. That's looking outside, blockchain. It is the word trust, right? The entire blockchain thing is based on trust. That we as a human don't trust each other. It started with Bitcoin. The government might rug us, or somebody might steal a coin or something. And we invented this entire system or entire coordination mechanism starting from Bitcoin to EigenLayer, which kind of helps us to coordinate amongst each other without trusting. What's your thought? Like, instead of that, if people could have been fixed, or if people would have been evolved in that way, that, hey, we just don't need anybody to trust. Because if you go to the Stone Age or something like that, where people used to say people were like more honest or more trustworthy in the society, how blockchain would have been, like, is the blockchain of concept of blockchain even relevant then? Like, if people are, trustworthy, and what do you think? Like, what lacks in humans so that uh, the trust factor is not there at mass? Just want to know your, philosophical thoughts, and that I hope I can frame the question properly to you. What I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great question. I think there have been good kind of establishment of that it's an evolutionary kind of principle of how humans kind of formed in groups and then formed kind of proto societies that then became larger and larger. And so we really have the ability to trust and have these close relationships. I think it's the numbers up like on the order of like 30 or 50 or so. Once we get out to a certain point, it's not possible for us to have the kind of reciprocal relationships and interactions that would, in fact, allow us to have the kind of flexible trust where you're not accounting for everything. You're just like, look, it's going to come out in the end. I have enough relationships with this person and so forth. And we've had waves of in different societies. Obviously, there have been, portions of society that were complete hunter gatherers. They'd still kind of be in clans, but they would like actually move from place to place, looking around for better food or kind of migrating like birds and other animals to like where the environment's going to support them. And then we actually settled down a lot. What was it, like 50,000 years ago when we started, 20,000, when we started doing agriculture. And that allowed people to stay in one place and create all the food they needed. So now it is much more important to build castles, protection. Part of that is like you need to actually store and protect your grain because otherwise a raiding party is going to come in and steal everything from you before the winter. And so we kind of up-leveled it, but that forced a lot more people to collect into an area and then not have the trust with each other. And more recently, we've seen this kind of phase of, people have left these kind of close to the land lifestyles and then moved largely to cities. It allows us to have so much more interaction with other humans. But now when you live in a city and there's millions of people, you can't even work the economics out of like having dinner with every single person in there. You'll be dead before that happens, right? What is the number? You have 50 weeks per year, 80-year life expectancy on the good side. So that's 4,000 weekends that you have to actually spend. And that's, and most of it, I mean, when you're 0 to 10 years old, you're not going out to restaurants with friends. So very limited ability to do that. So we have to have some other coordination mechanism. And, even for some of the early stuff, I mean, having money, it wasn't enough for a long time to just have the money. It was like the money had to be in these hard metals like silver, gold, or even before we figured out how to mine aluminum very easily. Aluminum was actually a precious metal. So you had a coin representation, but then the coin wasn't the value. You'd actually have to weigh the coin because people would like shave little bits of gold off the coins. It was like, that was one of the original reasons if you ever see like why coins that were made of solid metals, why a lot of coins had ridges on them. And the ridges is because if you were taking a knife and you were just trying to like scrape off some of the precious metal on the edges of the coin, that would show because the ridges wouldn't be there anymore. So we had a lot of these needs for these types of mechanisms over time. I think it's just a natural part of humans and others that we want to have close relationships with those sort of friends, family, close colleagues and so forth. And then in order to scale out, the free hand of economics, this is the free hand of coordination. In order for that to be, viable, we need to have mechanisms that scale and that are very secure across these large groups.
Talking about trust, one thing is how, as a mental model, how will we fit EigenLayer? Like from, let's say, how the internet started, right? And then it came Bitcoin, Ethereum, to roll-ups and now to EigenLayer. What is the correct mental model to fit EigenLayer in the blockchain realm as a trust machine?
Yeah, I think it's good that progression, Bitcoin and Ethereum and EigenLayer. And I don't mean to discount, there's a tremendous amount of other consensus mechanisms and amazing communities that have formed around all of these other Alt L1s. And Ethereum's sort of the original Alt L1, but I'll put in the category that Ethereum being so early and kind of really creating a new type of blockchain ecosystem that diverged from, all of the name coins and other derivatives that were just based on effectively the existing software base of Bitcoin. So those are the two progressions. We do have these other chains, but in some sense, all of the other chains, even if they have sub-second latency and 100 millisecond latency, like whatever it is, they're still very much in the image of Ethereum. It's sort of like this analogy that I put in artistry. No matter how amazing you are at painting natural landscapes or natural poses of people and everything, you're still in the classic style of art. You're in the style of Rembrandt and the other classic people who were painting for kings and queens and royalty for hundreds of years after the Renaissance. But when somebody came along and created Impressionism, that was a different type of art. And now anybody who does Impressionism is in that family. And then later Picasso creates, Cubism and Surrealism, and like these various movements are there. And Ethereum was a movement. And then essentially all of these other chains that were out there around Ethereum, they still look pretty much like a chain with a smart contract with some kind of base consensus and security mechanism. So, I don't want to discount any of them. They're all doing amazing innovations, but they are in that art family of that derivative. EigenLayer is a protocol which has actually created a new genre of blockchain. And in that sense, like the analogy of the new genre of art. And it was this idea that, although people had talked about modularity of like data availability, separate from execution, separate from consensus and so forth, the insight of EigenLayer was that the core security, the cost of corruption, the profit from corruption and others, that is a concept that if you're able to wrap a crypto economic primitive around it, you don't have to actually have a consensus mechanism and a smart contract running on a virtual machine that's part of a consensus blockchain, consensus run blockchain. That crypto economic security doesn't have to apply to only that computing model. So the insight and the thing here is the unbundling of Ethereum token and really any ERC20 token, maybe eventually any L1 token out there, that the security from that can be projected towards what classically have not looked like blockchain protocols at all. So just to try to make that a little concrete and tie this back to something you said before about like, hey, interesting, now we're seeing an EigenLayer. It's really coming out this kind of this cloud vision, this infrastructure vision and everything else. I just want to, to the extent that it helps people to kind of get some understanding, also feel like, hey, this is part of a bigger plan. I will tell you that like this has been really in the mind for years. I've been definitely for myself, I can tell, and I know Shriram talks to other people and stuff. This has been in my mind of like, where should crypto go? And more importantly, with EigenLayer now taking security as an elastic packetized object that we can project towards any piece of software, where's EigenLayer going to take it? So restaking, we heard about first from EigenLayer because as you aptly put it, you need to have a lot of available tokens that can be used as security inside of EigenLayer. Otherwise, what's the point? $10 billion of security available is great. It's, in some sense more than we need right now, which is fine because it's building up a lot of security needs are coming up. But compare that to if it was 10 million. If it was 10 million, what would be, the point of that, right? It wouldn't be enough to make any sense. So that's kind of layer one. And I'm going to actually talk about 4 layers for EigenLayer. The second layer up right on top of the security, which is the stakers bringing their tokens, is the operators. So the operators, take the stake from the users, and then they look at the autonomously verifiable services, the AVSs, and they pick and they say, hey, I want to be an operator. I want to validate and run this software. And so the operators kind of bring together the stake and the software and in fact now do useful work for, for the AVSs that are paying the fees to the operators and the stakers. So that's layer 2. And so from a flywheel perspective, we had to kind of spin up the flywheel and get enough stake in there. We then had to get enough operators that are interested, looking at this opportunity as like, this is an important thing for them to be doing. And those were the 2 first flywheels. Then the third flywheel that we had above that are these AVSs. We have to have enough autonomously verifiable service mindset around people who are building blockchain protocols. And by that, I mean protocols that have some trustless element, where they have security based in money, not based in, hey, I just tell you I'm going to run it the right way. So that was the third flywheel. And all of these flywheels, once we got the restaking side in 2023 and then through 2024, the operator side spun up quickly, and then ABSs started coming in, frankly, a lot faster than we could have even hoped or dreamed of. I think it shows there's a good PMF, because if you look at the reasons why you would want to build your protocol, you want to have something that allows you to very quickly get up to scale. You also want an environment that allows you to get a lot of decentralized validators. And then you want to be able to show your services for other people to be able to run. And so the ecosystem around ABSs allows them to sell to each other, as well as to sell up to the final layer or the final spinning layer. And then final layer is applications. And once you look at from the application view, the applications look at all stacks of software in the internet as something that sits in a cloud. And so that's where you sort of get the cloud and the infrastructure view. This final phase or this final layer of where EigenLayer becomes applicable is with the applications, kind of looking back in, looking at what effectively are these AVSs that are running all of the kind of services that they traditionally have used, trusting that a Amazon or software provider or somebody else is doing it the right way. I mean, I'll kind of pose a question when people are looking at a cloud and they say, hey, this all seems great, this is all going to run. What exactly will happen if your storage goes offline for a day or a week? Will you get paid money for it? Will your cloud provider lose money for having done that? And sadly, the answer to all of those are no. There's some legal agreements. Maybe you can sue them. Good luck with that. You'll spend more in legal fees and hassle than it's even worth. So this idea about trustlessness that we built around money with Bitcoin, and then making a programmable money with Ethereum, and then allowing now to have programmable finance, which is DeFi on Ethereum. Now what we've done with EigenLayer is we've essentially created a programmable security, and this programmable security construct can be added to any software that's running on the internet. The portions that are completely off-chain now become effectively Web3 because their security is being pulled out of the crypto ecosystem. So they're able to make promises to people about what should happen, what's not going to happen. And if those things happen correctly, then there is some reward given, there are some payments. And if the things are happening that are not correct, then you know that they're actually getting penalized. So the business motive, the monetary motive is aligned with what they're saying.
I think all the things we discussed, starting from the philosophical stuff to the technical things, pick a detail and, a little brain whirling. I just want to ask some light questions, just, ease up the air. I think one question I think many people have, like most crypto companies have labs and a foundation, most, if not all. Just want to know, like, why this structure as a general, and what's your role as a CEO of a foundation rather than not the labs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's very bespoke for each protocol. We've had protocols early in crypto where they did, they basically completely shut down the labs and they went straight to a DAO. They didn't even do the foundation step. And then we've had other ones where you have companies that the software labs company is essentially it, and they just resist from doing a foundation at all because they feel like it's just too early and so forth. EigenLayer, it's very important for us that, one of the principles of building in the public is that you actually have both what's being communicated out, and then there are ways that the community is able to interact and participate in the protocol coming back in. So the foundation, when we were formed, we were entrusted with around half of the token supply, a little bit less. And so that token supply, is going to uses for strategic partnerships, strategic grants. We're doing early developer grants for service providers who are helping to build and run portions of things that need to get stood up early on in the protocol. And, we want everything there to be very open, very public. We very quickly moved with the foundation to an EigenLayer improvement protocol, ELIP process. You can go online, look through our foundation. You can find the places where you can see what's coming up on the roadmap. You can put in community comments. We have a lot of discussions and those types of things. We've stood up councils that are including non-employee, inside type people who are looking and giving kind of oversight and guidance on what sort of programs we're doing. So it's about kind of reaching out. classically, I mean, we're currently in in a cycle where people are talking less. I think everybody in crypto is very much kind of running for cover under some of the regulatory actions that were happening over certainly, the entire time that I was in crypto until the most recent presidential transition. And so there was this idea that had been established through a lot of legal fighting and everything that decentralization would give you certain types of features that would be advantageous, given the stances of regulators and so forth. I think that's getting worked out pretty well now. I think that a lot of the people, if you look at Brian Armstrong, others, they're spending times in the governments. I think a lot of governments have finally come around to see the light that, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about it, like you want people to be able to express and do what they want to do. Like Brian Armstrong is not wrong when he's like 50 million Americans buy, hold, and care about crypto. So why isn't the government actually supporting us? So that sort of a reason is less important these days. But I think that actually in the crypto community, you um, you can have a lot of trust in the code and the open source and everything else. And eventually every protocol aims that it's going to kind of ossify and become completely unchangeable. I mean, if you look at it, Bitcoin as the OG of all crypto really ossified almost right away, just had not had major changes and upgrades. Ethereum, probably one of the biggest complaints about it from the Bitcoin space is that Ethereum does so many changes. It upgrades from proof of work to proof of stake. It's changing the way it builds blocks. It's maybe going to do shared sequencing. It's changing its data availability layers. It's so many changes are happening, and that drives somebody who's in Bitcoin nuts. They're like, how do I trust the chain that's changing a lot? And I hear them. I mean, I understand what they're saying. But Ethereum also has this mindset of like a lot of things need to develop over time. We're seeing this now with the transition we've had in EF leadership, and some of the best voices in Ethereum are really coming out and talking about solid proposals that Ethereum needs to change very rapidly. It needs to get to a final end game. It's going to have a lot more performance. It's going to have ZK proofs. It's going to have stateless validation. It's going to have very solid mechanisms around MEV and block building. But at a certain point, it's done at layer one. And then it's going to ossify like Bitcoin as well. I don't know if that's 5 years from now. I don't know if that's 3 years, but it's definitely not 20 years. And so that's kind of the track that you go. But in the whole time that you're getting to that ossification, you don't want a small group of people who are inside of one company, 10 or 20, maybe 5 leaders and then 10 or 15 core devs that are deciding everything. You want the community to be coming in and doing that as well. So the foundation is, kind of established for EigenLayer from that principle of being the kind of the outreach and including the community of what we're doing, and then enabling the stewardship for this much larger, community token treasury, which is being used in order to help, build the protocol overall and build the ecosystem around it.
Awesome. One question, as I think we were discussing in the first, that I think you mentioned that okay, crypto is like, not only about like casual stocks or memes and others. Although for many people that is, it's important because that can be an onboarding layer, because people draw analogies with earlier internet. I think you will be the better person to know, because I think I was not born that time in early 90s. So how people were onboarded into internet, like there were, gambling sites and, other things which are more, instant dopamine hits rather than the actual value being put, the research being put, and the social networks being built. Similar things, it's happening mainly on some few particular chains, which are like, more, which doesn't have the core blockchain ethos, mostly running on a few nodes, but they're providing great user experience. Again, it's easy, relatively easy when you have small set of nodes, you don't face latency and all these other things. But the more adoption, what I see, and people will, I think, will agree, it's on gambling kind of things. Not against it, fine. It's there. People like to gamble and take bets, but the onboarding layer is coming from people like trading meme coins, as you were mentioning, dropping of the Trump token. They like to long, short, and whatever, and all this pump.fun kind of things. Again, those are interested and good and fine, but this discussion kind of opens up like so many angles to crypto. and not only about EigenLayer perspective, but as a whole blockchain can we do so much more. What's your thought on this? Like how much, according to you, it can be variable, how much of this gambling and casual type of things are actually needed for the crypto space? And also what can be the onboarding unlock for crypto? The reason being I'm asking is because it's still skewed towards all this casual stuff, but we have all this value being locked, not being perceived to people. Like just to add one more thing here, like often people uh, relates the project with the token movement. And we have seen like a fundamental tokens don't move that much because that takes time to build value and other things. But at the same time, memes you just see whenever Ethereum goes up, Doge or Shiba Inu is going much more up. So people are like, hey, what's the point of all this thing if at the end the goal is to make money? So all these things, how do you think, like, kind of bypass it or on the value which is there in blockchain or EigenLayer, we can bring to people or people can interact in a more better way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack in what you just said there. Let me take a few angles on this. One is um, I am definitely guilty. I'll raise my hand on when I talk about things, I get very deep philosophical. I talk about all these fundamental things about society, the way people live, the history of like how people evolve through different phases of technology and food generation and everything else. But I have this other side, which I just want to state here, which is I think some of the highest value things for humans are these things that don't have immediate business value, right? Like the classic one would be, you know, visual arts and performing arts. So, music and dance and visual arts of painting and sculpture. And, if you go back, I mean, when you go to Greece and you go to the museums and you go to the Acropolis or you go to Rome and other things, nobody's going there to go and look at like, how did people actually run their market that day and, what was going on in the stock market of the day and whatever. You're going to see like, in some sense, the value of society and how well we've done is how much have we abstracted away the kind of mundane aspects of what it takes to kind of generate the food, generate the energy, generate stable housing, generate the right kind of healthcare, that all of these things so that people can get to what really makes us human. And what really makes us human, we can't really change this. We've had, millennia and millennia to go through where we've been imprinted. We only survived as social animals. So humans like to interact with other humans. Humans like to actually play games. I mean, we see it actually when you look at the animal kingdom. Almost I have coyotes that are constantly trying to get into my backyard because I live up against an open space preserve. And they find a way through the fence. And all of a sudden, I have a coyote mom with like 5 cute little coyote cubs in the place. And you just see them. They come out and they're just constantly playing and rolling. They're adorable. But it's built into the way social animals kind of have to go. So when I see things like social networking and, entertainment and others, I put it on this category that humans have this desire to create. This is why the arts and the other stuff is there. If you go back to like Kevin Kelly's, kk.org, 1,000 fans, which I actually am surprised when I talk in crypto, people don't come from a classic Web2 background. A lot of times they see Patreon and other stuff. They don't realize somebody in the mid 2000s envisioned what the future of technology was going to be and that it was going to be creator led. And their whole thing of the 1,000 fans was this is like 2005 kind of time frame. If you find 1,000 people around the world on the internet who will spend $100 on what you create, so you're entertaining them, you're making them their life better. And a lot of times if they subscribe to you, they go to online events and they get to meet you whenever, you can make $100,000, which, actually even now is very good around the world. But think about 2005 kind of time frame. Like, we're talking about the cost of housing and everything probably being like 4x lower in most Western countries and stuff. So I'm a big fan that like the point of all of this technology, I love the math, I love the computer science. I'm always going to build. I'm like a doozer, right? But most people in society, the value and the part that's going to like tickle their brain and make them happy is, to get more engaged in sports, watching sports, see what's happening on entertainment, creating their own, YouTube channels, creating their own Patreon or whatever else. The verifiability and the better internet for me, I'm building it for them. Like I want that experience to be more verifiable. How many people will you actually talk with and they're like, I don't have control over my digital self. It's owned by this company, that company, that company. They can deplatform me. They can take away my payments. They can tell me what's allowed, what's not allowed, and so forth. So this technology is here. I do want it for other things. Like I remember hearing this stat in the 2018 kind of time frame, which I think when I've talked to people in Asia, which is true, which is there's like on the order of magnitude more Australian beef that is sold throughout Asia than is actually farmed, and that is actually can come into Asia. You will look at it, organic food, the same thing. Sustainably farmed sustainable fish that's been farmed, caught the right way or farmed the right way. The amount that's sold is far. So we need to actually put verifiability into supply chains, right? Nobody knows when they go to healthcare, why are the healthcare costs this? Why are they that? It's not only a governmental problem. The governments are like, hey, can we even do something with this? There's no verifiable technology they can easily build to make end-to-end delivery, end-to-end price discovery. This is a big passion of Mark Cuban's. He'll talk about this because he's just like, I cannot believe in America how bad prescription drug prices are and so forth. It's coming up in the media cycle because, now there's actually a bill coming out of the current thing. I'm just pointing out that there are drugs that are $1,300 in the US that cost $80. Not in, this isn't going way, way far out. This is just going from New York to London. It's $80, right? And, these types of things. So we need to fix that. We need to, on the energy side, all of these grids and everything else, we need a way that everybody who's standing up solar panels on their house, or if a community decides to put together a solar farm and a battery and everything else, that we have ways that we can kind of create these networks and deal with it trustlessly versus having such heavy-handed kind of, centralized systems around it. So I want all of those, but like when I hear the onboarding, the others, I'm just like, bring it on. I want to make crypto the best place to create and distribute content, to distribute entertainment. If people want to do anything, let's say somebody does want to gamble, I can tell you like on a blockchain system, if it is really the open, decentralized, true, it's not like fake decentralized, type systems that are just like lightly attached to, but if it's actually being done with real randomness on chain, everything else, that is probably the safest, best place to be doing that activity. This is, there's no one behind the machine turning, a knob and basically making the payout rate that, when you're in a slot machine in Vegas or other, places around the world, you're supposed to have a payout rate of like, oh, the house is taking 52%, you're getting back 48%. But what tells you the house doesn't just go in and crank it up to 65, 35? You don't know, right? So like, it actually makes things like that, better. I mean, I know a lot of people are kind of against these, but again, I go back to the individualism. Like, if somebody wants to do things, they should. There should be a lot of help because there are actually addictions people have to substances, gamblings, other things. So I'm not saying like, this is something that should be all over. I think, there's always this like, people need to be responsible, but then there also need to be some safety rails around things. But in principle, I think, blockchain actually makes everything better, even these things that people are worried about. Oh, and then you
Yeah, I
asked me
think
the other part. So unpacking, you were saying also like, what are the things that we're going to do to get people on the web? And I think as much as we want in crypto to keep making crypto better, and like bringing more and building from it, I think we need to spend more time going out to the people that have succeeded in making applications and bringing consumers are and so forth. Like we have so many people that have built these successful web businesses that have been out on the internet and built those. And we just need to make blockchain the only way to build their next web application. So it's not this choice of going into crypto. It's just, why would I not be building the best version of technology on the internet? So we need blockchain to be the best infrastructure layer for those. Of course, we should have people in blockchain trying to make wallets easier and onboarding easier and everything else, but that's always going to be people going on to crypto. I want the crypto to just come into the normal realm of like, you look on your, Apple, app store, and you're going to download apps. I want, first 10, 20, 30, and eventually I want 99% of the apps in there to be using blockchain type verifiability and scale, security in the back end. And maybe they're going to express a lot of blockchain type stuff to the user. Sure, they can. I mean, but it doesn't have to be shown that way. I remember I was talking with somebody who was building, trying to build a better music platform for artists and other stuff. And I was like, look, you don't have to make things super complicated. Like if you give an artist the ability that they're able to actually kind of sign deals where people are getting future revenue streams on their future albums and other things, and you encode this as part of the blockchain, and when they distribute through streaming platforms like the one this guy was building, this person is building, it's a great one, on chain, that future revenue stream is against that token, you allow an artist who's struggling and needs to pay rent and everything else to now have a liquid, a liquid asset that they can allow the biggest fans. Again, going back to Kevin Kelly and the 1,000 fans, you tell your biggest fans, I don't just want $8 a month from you. Like, you have an opportunity to actually own part of my future albums, and you're going to be in there with me. So, things like that will express blockchain, but people will just see it as a way that they have some kind of a financial relationship, and they'll just know they can trust it. Why can they trust it? Because it's blockchain based. But they're not going to see themselves as holding ERC20s and being on a crypto wallet. Like, all of that's going to get extracted away from them, and they'll just see the goodness of these additional coordination mechanisms.
I think we're over the time, but I just want to ask you one question, because again, like, I just before starting only, I know I didn't hyped up enough that all these insights are going to flow from you, much from a philosophical and abstract level, because tech and all, it's all good, but I think before tech, it's the basics and fundamentals of why should be very clear. And for you, it's like, yeah, you want to give power back to people. I want to make the existing web verifiable. I want to like make people, not the power or the money, whatever we can denominate it, to like controlled by one part rather than being distributed to many people. If I get it all correctly, I think that is why you or maybe many other great people are in the industry, and we are, proceeding in a right direction. One thing, again, I think I'll try to make it short, or I like to also here elaborate one. Communism as a fundamental, right? Like, especially in current, like, modern thoughts, maybe coming from America, or like it has kind of spun it across. Like, people don't accept communism that much, right? And it has its own reasons. Maybe what I understood by communism is it's a central organization holding certain power, but it's, again, they have an angle of equality. If what I'm getting, like equal wealth or equal, equal lifestyle and everything. Do you think crypto has that angle? Because you're focusing on that individualism narrative, which is very important, to people functioning to their fullest capability. But again, there is a layer which you mentioned again, which I also agree that there is a social layer to it. But in crypto, many people have seen that, okay, starting from airdrops, okay, I think never Google or Apple, Nvidia, this company are like $1 trillion companies, but never the early users of Nvidia or so, until unless you have invested in that thing, have made money. But till now, I think with the latest Kaito, which is that the Kaito analytics platform, nobody has, haven't even used Web3, haven't even, just they have a wallet. Many cases, I think they just logged in with their Twitter, but they have made good amount of money, like $10,000. I've seen myself $15,000-$20,000 just by using Twitter, not even their protocol. So this is again, the wealth distribution, kind of not one company holding a lot of wealth. Is there some parallel to communism element here? What do you think? Or is it just some new kind of system with what crypto is building?
So, I mean, it's okay. This is a whole nother long discussion. I'll try to say a couple of thoughts here because, we've gone on for a little bit here. So you're hitting there, you definitely do have systems like, capitalism, feudalism, communism, socialism, right? And they all have different kind of flavors. And then, of course, you have the authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and so forth. I would say, capitalism, when it comes to taking scarce capital and efficiently using it to build up the value of a society, to build, better ability for businesses and people to create more value. That's the capitalism. The whole word in there is, you have the capital that some people have combined together with the labor that workers and people can bring. And then together you have economic output. And we've tried a lot of different types of ways of doing economic. And honestly, right now, when you look at authoritarian countries, the ones that have success economically, their economy is run capitalist. You look at communist countries, the ones that have success, they're, economically, their economics are run capitalism. And I think that actually bodes well for crypto, as much as we have people that are anti-capitalist and everything else. From my point of view, crypto and blockchain is what enables you to have the freest hand of economics that we've ever created as humans. And so to me, from my perspective, crypto, blockchain, cryptographic money, cryptographic DeFi, all of those, and then companies built on it is the purest and probably the highest performance version of capitalism that we're ever going to see. So that's great. So that's that layer. Then there's a social organization layer above that, which I've actually referred to sometimes as like, I'm sure other people use this word, but I kind of very structure, and I kind of have some musings and some writings about it. They're not public, but I've, write them down sometimes. I should collect them. But it's just sort of saying like the philosophy at the layer above about how you organize society, I loosely refer to it as cryptoism. And the sort of core tenet of cryptoism, from my point of view, is that there's an inalienable right of humans to fork a system of governance. And so the idea is that what does that mean to be able to fork? All of the information necessary must be public and available to all. All of the control of the assets must be pushed out to the farthest extent possible to the individuals. So the individuals have the right for what to do, and no one else is able to hold hostage assets. It's essentially, how do you create a system where you have low enough friction that if you do not like what's happening and you feel that it's been captured, you, even as a subset of minority, may say, well, that's really too bad. I wish it was done better, but our group is going to go off and we're going to create something new. This is the ultimate majority attack, which any crypto protocol, Bitcoin, any other, could be attacked by somebody with enough money. Everybody loves how great Bitcoin is doing. Reality is it doesn't have the crypto economic security to stand up against a nation state. The US could print a couple $1 trillion, buy enough Bitcoin, and then control the entire chain. What are we going to do? Well, what cryptoism tells you is the fundamental right to fork would be, everyone would say, well, that's not a valid chain. We see what's happening here and we're going to go somewhere else. So you can hang a lot of other things on it, but that forking ability and pushing that out to the edge and the control to the edge, that my keys, not your keys, not your crypto, not your keys, not your data, not your keys, not your identity, right? All of those things are part of cryptoism in my mind. And so it kind of transcends all of these systems we've had before of communism or socialism or democracy. We can layer all sorts of things in here, but all of them are going to be tending towards communism. Gets centrally captured. A lot of communist countries have become kleptocracies, right? Just the people in rule. They're like, everything's owned by the state. Everything's owned by the state. Wink, wink. It's actually owned by me and my family and, my cronies and whatever else. Socialism, has a lot of things that go wrong as well. Democracies end up getting centrally captured, constantly having to fight those things as well. So all of it goes back in my mind. If you don't have the ability to fork underlying all of this, if you don't have this sort of, society-based nuclear option where people just say, I don't need to have a revolution. I don't have to pick up the pitchforks or the guns or anything else. I'm going to take my keys and I'm going to take everything that I've done somewhere else. That is the power of cryptoism as a social layer on top of this very efficient capitalism, which is the blockchain execution.
I don't know if I've heard this word before, cryptoism, but I think whatever you discuss, starting from the feudal or the Stone Age systems and all the philosophical angles to get, I think that it's pointing towards this. Maybe your ultimate vision, to have a cryptoism based society, which kinds of improve our current way of living or coordination, whatever we put. I think we can go on and on with you, and because you have so much to tell. But I think this is the first of many recordings we'll be doing with you. I know you're super busy, super caught up, but we'll make sure you find some time with you and you're back. And
yeah, this was a great discussion.
Yep, awesome. I think we'll like to conclude this version of recording with you today. And thanks, Robert. Thanks, Super. Thanks for doing this. Pleasure having you.
All right, great. It's great seeing you. And we'll talk again soon. Had a great time. Thanks.